Hello again, guys. It's Kasim. I hope you're doing okay. I hope all is well. In this video or in this session, I want to talk about my thoughts on single fathers. And just to give you some context, by the way, a couple of days ago, I was at a conference. And whilst I was at that conference, the conference was all about exploitation. It was all about sexual harassment, grooming, trafficking, all that kind of stuff. And there were lots and lots of women, and I was the only man. It was highlighted that I seemed to be the only man at that conference. And we were talking about lots and lots of things, and obviously I was networking and that kind of stuff. But we got into talking about parenting and the role of fathers, and one of the ladies was talking to me about single fathers and the difficulties that single fathers have to protect their children. And she was asking me about my thoughts on single fathers and that sort of stuff. And it got me thinking a lot about single fathers. And I wrote down some notes that I thought I would share on this platform. I don't know whether you're going to find them useful or not, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this. If you were reflecting and thinking about single fathers yourself, I'd love to know what comes up for you as you think about that, and what is triggered when you hear that phrase, single fathers. So I want to begin by just sort of mentioning the obvious, which is that single fathers exist. And single fathers exist out of a multiplication of different reasons. I think a lot of us, when we tend to, and even myself, when I tend to think about single fathers, I tend to think about the mother dying or the mother going away or something like that. But the reality of the matter is there is a lot of men who are single fathers because the mother of the child, the biological mother of the child, is either hurt the child or neglected the child, or in some way or another, the mother is not capable of giving the child what it needs in all of the different capacities, whether that be safety, or whether that be in terms of the physical needs, in all kinds of different variations. And I think that a lot of us, we tend to forget this. And one of the things that I was saying to the lady the other day is that, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail in a second, but one of the things that I was saying to the lady is a lot of us tend to discount fathers because a lot of people can't seem to separate that you can be a great father but be a terrible spouse. You can be a terrible brother but actually be a fantastic father. And a lot of people don't seem to be able to differentiate between those two things. It's like, well, if you are a liar, a cheater, a manipulator, then therefore you've abused women in any kind of capacity, or you've been violent towards other men, then in that actually means and translate, and there's a correlation in saying that you cannot be a great father, which is not true. That is not true. There are lots of fathers out there who have terrible pasts, and even are not very good, nice people. But when it comes to their children, when it comes to their offsprings, they are great fathers. They're present for the child. They remember the child's birthday. They are fun in all of the different things that fathers are, whatever children are looking for, that they are able to offer their child. So that's one of the first things. But I want to go back to the point that I was saying earlier on, which is that single fathers are not necessarily made single fathers because of some terrible thing that happens. Sometimes single fathers are made single fathers because they wanted to be a father, but they can't seem to find anyone. And so being a single father, sometimes the person could be gay, the person could go through, they can't find a spouse and decide that they would like to go through IVF. Or have somebody, of course, carry the baby for them. And I think a lot of us tend to forget that. And one of the second things that I wrote down here is, and it's linked to that, is that we assume that kids are better off with the mother. But my question is, are they? Because I believe that kids are best off with a person who loves them. And this actually is attached to something that I found to be very, very, very interesting, which is that I was doing some research on adoption and foster care and all that kind of stuff. And I found it to be very, very, very interesting that a lot of kids who maybe have HIV, or who were born from from a mother who was in prison, or from a family that has drug addictions, typical families would not adopt or foster that child. But in the context of a gay couple or a lesbian couple, they are the ones who tend to actually go ahead and take on those children. And so you would think, well, a child would much rather, and a lot of people think like this, we would much rather the child stay in foster care, or the child stay without loving guardianship, than go with a lesbian couple, than go with a gay couple. But the reality is, and this has been my experience, is that children need to just be loved. And it doesn't actually matter where that love comes from. Of course, it would be wonderful if that love came from their biological parents. Right, and that care and that safety and that affirmation and that encouragement, it would be wonderful if it came from them. But the reality of life is that that is not how it works. And what I would say is that a surrogate guardian or parent is better than no parent at all. And so one of the things that I do think is really important is that we should not confuse the fact that just because a man is raising a child by himself, or he's decided to foster or mentor, or whatever capacity he's decided to be looking after a child, that the child is going to be less than because they didn't have the mother. That is not true. As long as that child is loved and supported and is given all the other things that a child needs, that child will grow up to live a fulfilled life and is going to go on and flourish and soar and succeed. That doesn't, of course, mean, and there's always going to be a caveat, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be challenges, right? The child will have questions about, who is my mother? What happened to my mother? And again, this is, I think, where it comes down to communication. Because my experience has shown me that a lot of parents, guardians, people who take care of children lie to them. They keep things from them. And part of that they do in order to protect the child, but I don't believe that. I've come to realize that kids are very, very, very strong. Kids are very, very, very adaptable. And in fact, they say, like, if you've adopted a child, it is better to tell that child as soon as possible where they come from. What were the circumstances of their birth, and that actually lying to them causes more issues for them down the road if you keep that from them, if they were to discover that. And actually, do you know what? I can't prove this, but I genuinely think at the core, all of us know when someone is keeping something from us. Their behavior, their mannerisms, they will make certain decisions to get us not to talk about certain things, or to not watch certain things. And we won't actually know what the problem is, but deep down, I feel as though as people, as a child, you would know that something isn't quite right, that something is being kept from you, but you just won't be able to articulate what it is. So I do think that it's really, really important for me to touch on this area, which is honestly, kids are better off with the people who love them, people who care about them. And it doesn't necessarily matter who those people are: men, lesbian couples, women, older parents. It could be even siblings, right? Because you might have a situation where, and I've heard of stories where siblings have taken on their younger sibling because both their parents have passed away, or a parent has passed away, or something like that. And because those siblings have offered the love, the support, the encouragement, the knowledge, that child has gone on to live a remarkable kind of life, and into adulthood has matured and has gone on honestly to fulfill all of their capacity and their potential and achieve greatness in their life. So I do think that is really important. The other thing that I wrote down here is that it requires more than just logic to be a great father. It has to be intentional. So this goes back to something I said earlier on, which is that, of course, it would be wonderful if a child is brought up by their mother and father. That would be, of course, the ideal situation. But that isn't the reality of how a lot of life works. Life is complicated. Things are complicated. But what I do think is something which is true and is a basic tenet and principle of guardianship in all of its forms is that there has to be an essence of balance, of intentionality, of communication, of openness, of really taking the time to look at the young person and look at what they need and look at where they want to go and look at what their leanings are and look at ways to support them. As somebody who's worked in a school and as somebody who's worked with young people in all walks of life, I mean literally from kids who are 11 years of age all the way to people who are 25 years of age in colleges and universities and doing postgraduate degrees, one of the things that comes up over and over and over again is the amount of young people who say to me that they have not had guardianship. They've not had things communicated to them. They've not had things explained to them. They've not had things they've not had their life tailored to them. And this again is now talking about the role of the parent. Look, I understand there is complexities around being a parent and getting the house done and the cleaning and the washing and all and getting the bills and paying all of this kind of stuff. I get all of that. But what I do think is important is if in whatever circumstances you do end up in a situation where you do have a child, I do think it is an obligation for you to really start looking at yourself, start looking at the environment that you're creating, start understanding that children learn a lot more from what they see than what you tell them, start looking at some of the contradictions that are happening in your life, where you're saying to the child that they should be reading, but then you don't read, where you say to your child that they should work hard, but then you are constantly talking about the victim mentality, complaining about the government, complaining about all of these men or women or all of these other things that have come out. And attached to this is, as a man, it isn't enough to simply be the fun dad. It isn't enough to simply be the man who just gets things done. There also has to be an element of community. You have to balance out your life and think about it is important, for example, if you have a boy or a girl, to introduce them and to as many different types of women that exist out there as possible, including men as well, right? And so that they can have that association, so that they can understand the worldview. It is important for you to put a support system around yourself where you're not only getting support from men, but you're also getting support from women, whether those be counselors, whether that be midwives, whether that be nurses, whether that be medical professionals. But you want to surround yourself with a community. And I guess this is really one of the things that I think is really important that I was reflecting on, is we're living in an age today where I feel and I think and what I'm seeing is that a lot of us are wanting to live this hyper individual lifestyle. And the problem that you've got with this is that you then are left to fend for yourself when something goes wrong. And we're living in a world at the moment. I remember I read a quote that said this: we're living in a world, the late Peter Drucker said, we're living in a world which is full of complexities. How did he put it? He put it as, I can't remember how he put it, so I'm going to paraphrase what he said. He said something to the effect of, we're living in a world of overwhelming complexity, tremendous competition, and a constant innovation. And don't quote me on that, but it went something like that. And it was Peter Drucker who said that. And it is true, right? The world has become global. The things are constantly changing every day. There's a new politician in power all the time. There's somebody doing something corrupt. There's somebody abusing power. There is an economic system crashing. The house prices are going up. The taxes are going up. Inflation is going up. Interest rates are going up. We're living in this world which is very turbulent. And I feel as though that if we're going to be, if we are wanting to move forward and consistently keep growing and keep adapting and keep really pushing to the edges of our individual capacities, we need to be in a community. We need to be around people and surround ourselves with people who want the best for us. And that means that you may have to get people around you who are not only Muslims but Christians, but leaders in different areas, right? You may be somebody who your profession is financing, but actually it would be wonderful if you can collaborate and you can partner and you can be mentored and you can work with somebody who is in the arts world, somebody who is a teacher. And I feel as though, and this comes actually partly from the conference that I went to a couple of days ago, in order to beat things like exploitation, to beat things like grooming, one person cannot do that. We cannot put the emphasis on the political system to do that, on the judicial systems to do that, to the policing to do that. We as individuals have to work together in order to stop situations happening where young people are being groomed. We have to talk about it. And actually, one of the things that I was saying to the lady at the conference is the fact that there are no men is a problem in itself at a conference about how grooming happens. And I'm generalizing here. The vast majority of the people who are in the grooming world are, and exploitation world and sex trafficking are men. And so it's vital that when they are doing these conferences, that they bring men to these conferences, right? And I guess if I'm really summing up what I'm talking about today, what I'm really trying to get, and I've been thinking a lot about recently, is that we need to start collaborating together. A lot of the issues that we have to solve in reality may seem huge, but actually on an individual level, if we all come together and we start doing things together, we are going to solve a lot of problems. And going back to single fathers, a lot of look, if you look around at the world at the moment, there are a lot of single mothers. And there is a lot of men who want to be fathers, who want to play the role of fathers. And so the issue is that we have this issue where we've got a lot of women who have who are single mothers, and there is a lot of kids who don't have a father in their lives. And so what I'm suggesting is that as a community, we need to start rallying. The uncles, the brothers, the cousins, right? The men need to start rallying around so that we can begin to support each other, because this role of a father needs to be filled in a child's life. And on the other side, talking about single fathers, the role of a mother also has to be filled in that child's life. There is a reason why that role exists. You may disregard it and say things like, and I think we have to be this is why I'm talking about this, because we have to be so careful that we do not disregard certain roles by trying to justify them in some other way. Sometimes I hear people say things like, well, a child is better off with no father than a half decent father. And I think to myself, is that really true? And when you say that that child is better off with a half-decent father, how do you know that? How could you possibly justify that? What evidence have you got for that? Because we haven't got any evidence that proves that, right? We know, and also, what are your criterias for grading what a father is, right? We know, for example, and this is a very controversial subject for me to talk about, but it has to be talked about because these things are not being talked about anywhere. You know, I was having a conversation with my friend, and one of the things that we talked about was the bar for being a mother is very, very, very low. Right? And if you look at many of the kids who are having issues in their lives, who end up on the side of crime, who end up having very difficult early years, right? Many of them are being raised by single mothers. And if you look at neglect, neglect is one of the biggest safeguarding issues that are out there. And we have to ask, if the majority of kids are with their mother, then where is this neglect coming from? Right? And we're not talking about physical neglect, we're talking about emotional neglect, right? Which is kind of attaches to that thing that I was saying earlier on about us as parents, both mothers and fathers, really doing the work on ourselves, looking at the contradictions on ourselves and actually asking, am I asking my son to be emotionally intelligent? But my question is, what work am I doing to become emotionally intelligent myself? Am I going to counseling? Have I really got the ability to communicate how I feel, what I want, what my dreams are, what my goals are, what my needs are? Can I really communicate those? I talk about forming great friendships and how it's important that boys have good communication and friendships with the opposite sex. But can you honestly, as a parent yourself, say that you are able to communicate and you've got established great relationships with the opposite sex? Now, this isn't me like blaming or saying that you know, that women are to blame or men are to blame. It's just a conversation, and I'm just saying this because this is what I've been thinking about. And me as Kassem, I'm thinking about my role in the community and not just being a hyper individual and doing what I want and what's best for me, but thinking about the community and how I can play my role in the community in protecting and serving and being able to make a contribution. It's just, this is a very deep topic, but I was just really thinking about it. There's so many places I could have gone with this, but it's just based on the fact that I was at that conference. This is where my headspace is at and what I was thinking about. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? You know me, I'm always keen to hear your point of view. Like, this is just me sharing with you what is coming up for me as I'm thinking about this topic. This doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong. This is just what I'm reflecting on and it's coming up for me. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. As always, I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll speak to you very soon. Bye for now.